Hi, I'm Pastor Rhonda.
And I'm Pastor Seth.
You're listening to Growing Hope,
Living Faith. Well, welcome back to the podcast. We are glad that you guys are listening in. Once again, coming out on Saturday.
Yes,
not
I
Thursday.
like that though, because the pressure is off of us from recording
Yes.
early in the week.
I agree. So we're recording on a Thursday, you know, and this is probably the first time we've ever recorded on a Thursday.
Yeah,
and
first time for everything.
That's right. And so this will be coming out on Saturday, and hopefully you guys were able to listen in last week. If you haven't, go back and check it out, because we kind of gave an update on some things just about life in general. And I know you're going to be traveling to Blue Ridge this weekend and doing some work on the house.
Yes, well, Hiawassee, and I was in Blue Ridge last weekend with my daughter and my daughter-in-law.
That's right.
We had a great time doing that. But yeah, so going back tomorrow, working on the house, and I'm trying to get schoolwork done before I go. And
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, and then like I said, I'm doing stuff like last Saturday. I went for a fly, you know. Me and my dad, we flew down and visited my uncle. It was so good, and it was pretty crazy. We traveled, it should be about probably like an hour and a half to an hour and 35-minute flight. And on the way down, we had about a 35-knot tailwind. So we made it like an hour and 8 minutes. So we were hauling down there.
Wow.
And, but it was really cool. You know, we flew and we kind of flew down the Georgia-Alabama state line, but we could look over and see Atlanta. We could see Stone Mountain. We weren't even really that high because of the winds. You know, it was just really kind of cool to, like I said, you just kind of see it's different view. I mean, obviously people fly all the time, and so you get that view. But you know, when you're flying the airplane, and it's a totally different experience. And
and I bet your dad loved it.
Yeah, it was so good. And we got to go see my uncle. I have an uncle that lives down in Harrison County, and so we flew into the airport, and the people were amazing. It's really cool. Like, they had a crew car, which is a courtesy car. So you know, my uncle has a little. Well, it's not little, but he has a Dodge Ram pickup truck, and it's a stick shift, and it's a regular cab, so it doesn't have like a 4-door. It's just a 2-door. There's no back seat or anything. So we're planning on driving around in that, and we were like, and my uncle's he's not a small dude. He's kind of, he's about 6'3", and you know, and so we're going to cram in that. But they had a crew car, so it's courtesy. We just we took that out and went and had some dinner, or some, I guess, brunch. It wasn't dinner, it was brunch, and kind of got to see around, see where he lived. So it was really cool, you know. And once again, it just provided some of those cool opportunities as I'm trying to build up hours and all that stuff. And so, you know, get to do that.
That's still amazing.
A lot of fun. So yeah, so it's good. So, you know, I've had a good week, and hopefully you've had a good week, and I'm ready to kind of dive into these passages, because these passages are really rich on I think rich is a great word, on a very, very deep level, and
at the same time
very basic
stuff we've heard.
Yeah, and stuff that we've preached just over and over and over and over. But we're just saying, I mean, you know, we're just talking like, we overcomplicate things on such a deep level. Yes, we do. And I love, you know, that Jesus comes, and I think his thought process, or I think he was just trying to get us to a place to say, you know, it's great that you have all these laws, and it's great that you have all of these rules, but man, it should be a lot easier. It doesn't have to be that hard.
Right.
It doesn't have to be that hard.
And he condenses it into
2.
Yeah.
And that's what the passage is this week, or one of the passages.
And they all kind of like say the same thing, though, even from an Old Testament view. Yeah,
and that's what's just crazy, you know, and that's what I love about lectionary is they're so intertwined on such a deep level, and that's, like I said, that's what I love about the Bible, and it's what I love just about kind of this lectionary thing, and so it's really, 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 really good.
And I admit, when I saw Leviticus, I was like, oh. I mean, who doesn't like moan and groan when you see Leviticus? Because it can be so, it just bogs you down with all the rules and everything. But this was good.
Yeah.
And it just echoes the gospel passage.
Oh, on a very, very deep level. Yes, which is so good. And I think we probably should just start with the Matthew passage. I think that'll kind of open us up. And I think everybody will probably be pretty familiar with this passage. But I'm going to let you read it today. Okay. You have your glasses on. So.
I do have my glasses, but I'm not used to wearing my glasses, so I keep backing up.
Well, if you need me to read it, I can read it. But
I will try.
All right.
So Matthew 22:34 through 46. When the Pharisees heard that he had silenced the Sadducees, they gathered together, and one of them, a lawyer, asked him a question to test him. "Teacher, which commandment in the law is the greatest?" He said to him, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the greatest and first commandment. And the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments hang all of the law and the prophets." Now, while the Pharisees were gathered together, Jesus asked them this question, "What do you think of the Messiah? Whose son is he?" They said to him, "The son of David." He said to them, "How is it then that David by the Spirit calls him Lord, saying, the Lord's is that right? The Lord said to my Lord, sit at my right hand until I put your enemies under your feet. If David thus calls him Lord, how can he be his son?" No one was able to give him an answer, nor from that day did anyone dare to ask him any more questions.
I love it.
I love that last part. Yeah, don't even go there.
You know, I think we hit on this a little bit last week because I think the gospel passage, it was essentially them asking, the Sadducees asking Jesus a question and then him having the kind of the mic drop response. But this would have been very common back in the day. And, you know, I've heard preachers kind of talk about this and scholars and theologians, that it was been very, very common to make sure that you actually understood something. You know, when you would go up and ask a rabbi, lots of times they would ask you a question back to make sure that you really had a full understanding. And sometimes it's so easy just to want the answers and for, you know, to really try to push. And sometimes I think we like to be able to give people answers, once again, just because we want to be able to have that control and stuff. But I love what Jesus does, you know, on such a deep level that, you know, they'll ask him a question and then he'll have a response or sometimes a question. And then, you know, it's just kind of this back and forth. But that would have been very, very common. And I think it's still common today in Jewish custom and culture.
I'm thinking about my professor at Trevecca.
Yeah.
I will turn in a whole paper and he'll, on his grading part, he will have like 10 questions. I'm like, why are you asking questions? But it's true. It makes you think deeply, and it makes you sometimes second guess what you thought you believed.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what essentially happens in a lot of these situations, you know, with Jesus, that they'll ask him a question, he'll respond with a question, and it makes them think, and it really puts them potentially in a bind. You know, Jesus is obviously very smart with how he uses his questions. But, you know, this first portion we've heard on a very deep level, you know, the greatest commandment. You know, they come to him and ask him, hey, what's the greatest law? And then we have this response from Jesus. You know, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. That comes from Deuteronomy, which is very prominent. It's the Shema, which is still recited by Jews to this day, every day. You know, they think that this is literally the very hinge of Scripture, that as you have this history that kind of comes before, then you have this kind of totally different that comes after. And so it's a beautiful, you know, reality of, you know, you shall love your God with everything. And then the next one is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself, which comes from Leviticus.
Do you think in verse 36, going back up a little bit where it says, teacher, which commandment in the law is the greatest? Do you think they're thinking of the main 10, like the thou shalt not steal, thou shalt, you know, all these thou shalt not do's? Are you thinking they're thinking that short list? Or are you thinking that maybe they're thinking about all the things they've added on to it?
That's a good question. Well, I mean, obviously they're trying to set him up.
Right.
You know, they're really trying to do whatever they can to really try to make him trip up. And this is a lawyer, essentially,
right,
that's asking him. You know what I'm saying? Like, this isn't even just a teacher of the law. Like, I mean, they are literally trying to bring out the best of the best of the best to ask these questions, to try to trip him up, to try to get him to commit to a thought process, a way of thinking, because within doing that, essentially, it allows them. They're trying to, like I said, they're essentially trying to gain grounds to kill him. You know what I'm saying? And so, you know, I mean, they're bringing the best of the best.
Kind of hang himself here.
Yeah. So which commandment is the greatest? Yeah. You know, that's a tough question. Yeah. And I imagine a lot of rabbis or different rabbis might have different responses to this question. But, you know, I think Jesus obviously uses, like I said, Deuteronomy. He uses Leviticus, goes back to those two things. And really, I think just exposes their hardness and the fact that they maybe don't truly love God with all of their heart, soul, mind, and strength. You know what I'm saying? Right. Like I said, it exposes I think, the reality of the people that he's talking to on a very, very deep level. But I think they probably were looking for, like, you shall have no other gods before me, probably.
Right.
I'd imagine they thought would probably be the biggest one.
Right. Well, let's talk a little bit about you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart. I mean, that's a big command right there, with all of your heart, not some of it, not a little bit of it, not an undivided heart, but a whole heart that loves God, and with all of your soul. Like, what does that mean to you? What do you think that means, with all of your soul?
Yeah. That's a great question. Once again, too, you're just asking questions. I feel like you're in this interview mode right now. I love it. Going back to Deuteronomy, and just kind of remembering back some of my Bible classes. If you really begin to lay these out in Hebrew, the first one is essentially kind of related to, the heart. It's very much this physical, that we are to love God with everything that we are physical. The next one essentially kind of lays out the kind of our thoughts. So like our soul is like, essentially our thoughts. It's everything that our thought process, like I said, our thought processes, how we operate, our emotions, all of those things. We are called to love God with all of those things. Right. Then it's mentality of your soul. It's really your mind, but then your soul. It really, if you go back to the Hebrew word, it's this word called nephesh, which essentially what the nephesh was considered to actually be your throat. It was the very thing that if your nephesh wasn't working, then you couldn't have life, and so it was really considered to be your very, very life force. So literally the very thing that gives you life, because if you didn't have it. And everything that we feel like does give us life, everything that we feel like makes us who we are, we're still called to love God with that, which is really cool.
And I think about, you hear the phrase like, I love you with all that I am, all that I'll ever be.
Right.
It's just like, all that I could ever be, all that I am. I love you with all of that. My thought, because it says my mind as well, and that's my thoughts. That's everything.
Right. Well, we've taken love and we've turned it into a term of I don't know. I want to say endearment, but I don't know if that's right. But we've totally taken the word love and we've totally turned it into something. To whereas I feel like, obviously, for the Hebrew people, love had a totally different meaning, and there was different levels of love, and there was different words that they would use for love. Like we'll say that we love God, but then turn around and say we love pizza. Yeah, right. We've all heard that before. But yeah, what does it mean to really, really love? I think it's much, much deeper than our love. And I think that, to love God with all of our physical, to love him with all of our emotional, our spiritual, all of those things, man, to love him with like I said, it's very much this total dedication, and literally, everything about us, we're called to love God. And what's important is, he doesn't necessarily quote the verse in front of this in Deuteronomy, but if you go back to it, it's Hear, O Israel, and that's Shema. It's called the Shema. But Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. And if you really think about that, after it's paired after this, that there's no division in God. It's God and it's God alone. There are no other gods. And this would have been very, very important, I think, back in the day, because they were in cultures. And I wouldn't say it's probably very different than today. I think there's a lot of different gods that we might serve that we don't call gods. To whereas, they would have had gods that, brought water or brought rain, and they had gods who helped the crops grow, and they had gods, for all these different things. But essentially, Jesus is very much making this cut of, hey, or God is making this cut with the people. Hey, I am God. I am one. There's no division within me. Like, you're either going to love me and be wholly devoted to me, or you're not.
Right.
And that's a crazy kind of concept. And then this love passage comes directly after that, to be my people and for me to be your God means that you are going to love me with everything. You're going to love me with your possessions and your physical and your body. You're going to love me with your mind and your spiritual and all of your thoughts and all of those things. And you're going to love me and allow me to be the very life force, the very thing that gives you life.
But isn't that so amazing? That's what I love about God, because he doesn't say, you're going to serve me with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and you're going to obey me. You're going to do this for me, and you're going to do that for me. You're going to work for me with all your heart, soul, and mind. All he wants from us is our love, and everything else falls into place. Yeah. When you love God, then you automatically serve him, and you do things for him. Yeah. But it has to flow out of that love.
Sure. Yeah, and go ahead. What were you going to say?
I was just thinking, out of all the other gods expected people to do things for them, and all he wants is love.
Yeah, this God's different. Yeah, this God's different on a very, very deep level. And this God operates different. Is such a beautiful, once again, just reality. A reality of God. And we see it once again with Abraham, right? Abraham and Isaac, like he's not the God that requires human sacrifice or for you to give your firstborn or to kill your firstborn, which really has pretty big implications. And it's probably a totally different conversation to talk about Jesus on the cross, what does that necessarily mean for that? But man, like this isn't that God. He totally is a very, very different God. And the greatest thing for him is, hey, love me. And I think that the 10 Commandments, when you really boil it down to it, I imagine that the hope for a God that's trying to love his people is that he would give these 10 Commandments, and that would be enough. People would look at him and they'd be like, oh yeah, like that's a great way to live life. That's a better way to live life. But what often happens is we as human beings, I feel like there's just some kind of condition that we need more. Like we need to understand, yes, this is right and this is wrong. We try to think and operate, especially I think within the church, that it's either black or white. And I think, I think we need to try to probably move beyond that a little bit. And I think what this does is this sets us up to, hey, you really shouldn't worry about black and white. Lots of times you think of sin and we would like imagine if there was a line in between us, right? And we think of sin, if that line was sin, we often think, man, how close can I get to sin without sinning? Right. And that's the question that we often ask. Instead of asking and maybe living in a way to say, you know what, well, if that's potentially sin, if that's what brings me down, if that's what brings death to my life, because it brings me death both in my physical, both in my spiritual, both in my life force, both of all in all of those things, if that is sin, instead of trying to get as close to that line as I can get, man, I should be trying to run as far away from that line as I can. Right. And so I think that this sets us up with that mentality to love God. It means that we are totally running to him with everything that we are. We are pushing into him. And like I said, I don't think it becomes a black and white issue. And I think that that's what, Jesus is trying to do is, hey, this isn't necessarily black and white. I mean, if you love me with everything you are, then out of that love is going to flow the next part, which is you love yourself, but you also love your neighbor.
Right. And we did talk about that a little bit before about loving ourselves, because I've always focused on the part that says love your neighbor. And it's like the rest of it, as you love yourself. It's like I don't hear that part because I want to focus on loving my neighbor. But what does that mean to love ourselves? Because, how does that fit in when we're taught that we have to do this cruciform living where we have to deny ourselves and pick up our cross? And, we're taught that, but it just seems like in the last probably few months, I have had my eyes so opened. I know I've probably talked about it on the podcast, but really loving ourselves as like seeing ourselves as God sees us and embracing the fact that we are fully human. That is a good thing. Yeah. And loving ourselves and, just knowing that that we are created in God's image and we're worth being loved. And when we love ourselves and when we receive the love of God, then we are capable of loving other people.
That's right.
But so many times we don't love ourselves and we're trying to muster up this something that looks like love, and it doesn't last because we're just doing it in our own strength and we're doing it in our own, selfish, or, we don't love ourselves and, we're just trying to use people like we talked about, using people for a means to an end. And yeah, it can get so complicated in loving people well, but it really does start with loving God, loving ourselves, receiving his love, and then it does spill out.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Because there's no better hands for our lives to be in, right? And so for loving God with everything that we have physical, then and everything that we are spiritual and everything, emotional and our very life force, then it means that we take our hands off of the reality of our own identity, and we take our hands off of determining what's, like I said, what's good and bad per se. You know what I'm saying? And so like, there's no better hands for us to be in than the hands of God to allow him to be our identity. And if we're getting our identity from him instead of the world, and if we're really, really loving him, and we're saying, all right, God, here's all of my life. Here's everything that I have. Not saying that life's going to be perfect. There's going to be hard things in life that are going to happen, but it's so much more easier to be in a better mental state when we are truly loving God and we're saying, you know what, God, I'm not going to find my identity in what other people are saying or what other people are thinking or doing around me or the possessions that I have or that I don't have. I'm not going to find my identity in all of that poop or whatever you want to say. But I'm going to find my identity in you. And the way that I find my identity in you is I have to keep running to you, and I have to keep giving you my life, and I have to give you my possessions, and I have to give you my mental state, and I have to give you all of those things because I think God's desire is he wants to change our identity. And as he changes our identity with those things, then it becomes so much more easier to love ourselves. And I would almost contend that if we don't love ourselves well, then it's become so much more harder to love our neighbor.
Oh, absolutely. And I was thinking about this verse when you were talking about, positioning ourselves to receive that kind of love. But Psalm 90 verse 14 says, satisfy us in the morning with your steadfast love so that we may rejoice and be glad all of our days. That's one of the lectionary passages. But, I was just reading a book it's called what is the Bonhoeffer book? Is that how you say it?
Life Together?
Yes. Okay. And it's about, about this discipline of getting up in the morning and spending time with the Lord. But when we do that on a daily basis and we just position ourselves in the morning in his steadfast love, we are changed. But we have to make that effort to do that, to put ourselves in his love.
And that's what's hard.
Yeah.
That's the hard part of it,
I'm over here making all kinds. My cord to my headphones is in my way. Sorry about that noise.
No worries. But that's the hard part. Is that discipline to really be able to do that, and that's like I said. That's what we talk about. Like the complicated part is not the list of rules. Like I said, Jesus didn't come and give us his list of rules, but the complicated part is that continual finding that identity in him, the continual running to him, the continual allowing him to define our lives and what makes us tick and the things that are going to be important for us or should be important for us. But like I said, that's the beauty, I think, of Jesus is he comes and he's like, listen, I know there's all these rules. I know you guys love rules, but God didn't intend for this to be all about rules. He wanted this to be about a relationship, and that's what it is. And God says, hey, have a relationship with me and go have a relationship with other people and love on other people. It really takes us
right back to the garden. That's what he intended from day one. Yeah. He put people in the garden. Of course, we know sin went terribly wrong, but that was his intention from day one, is this communion with God, this open relationship, this, talking and walking together and just enjoying fellowship with God. And then there was this unity between, humanity and all of creation. That was his intention from the very beginning. And I think that's what he's working to get us back to that place. He's getting us there by transforming us and so that we're in that state and we can model what that looks like to the world.
Yeah, on a deep level. And what a story once again of humanity. And we're still struggling with the same thing. I mean, they could eat from anything in the garden. I mean, it was plentiful what all they could eat from. But it was just that one, or the two trees, like, we can't, we want those. We want that to be our identity. We want the knowledge. We want the power. We want the ability. We want the control. We want all those things. God's like, no, I just want you to let me be God. And it's the same struggle today with humanity that we have. It's not two trees,
And I feel a Dr. Phil moment coming on. I just want to say, how's that working for you? Yeah. It's like all these years later. Yeah,
absolutely. It's the same story, over and over and over. But the thing is, and what I love about even that next part in the gospel passage, is essentially Jesus is setting up and telling us, like, listen, who do you attach yourself to, right? And everybody, they were like, oh, well, David, and just like, man, who's David? Like, he is setting up this mentality or this reality of saying, yeah, you can listen to David, and you can keep on living life that way, and the way that David essentially, and kind of led you guys to believe where it was about the law and the prophets. And there's all these great stories once again, where David found the ark, and then they found the scriptures, and they read the scriptures, and there was repentance, and there was all of this kind of stuff. Or you can truly listen to the Son. You can truly listen to the Son, right, which is me. You can truly listen to me and have a different life, and have a life of freedom, and have a life that truly is pushing into what God really intended for all this to be in the first place. Or you can keep on struggling. You can keep on struggling like David.
And my mind just drifted to Transfiguration, where the voice says, this is my son, listen to him. Listen to him. Don't listen to, this is about David, but at that point that was about Elijah and Moses. It's like, don't listen to anyone but Jesus. And that's what we have to do today.
That's it. And that's what's so cool about the other lectionary passages too, is like they just point to this mentality of what does it mean to really truly love the neighbor. Leviticus talks about how we treat other people, how we speak about other people, how we think about other people, and it's so important, how we interact. Well, let's just read it because I think it's so good. It's once again, this isn't an easy passage, but it's not that these are rules, but as we are loving God, these should be the way that we just live life, because it overflows out of that love of God. And it's Leviticus 19, it's 1-2, and then 15-18 says this: the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak to all the congregation of the people of Israel and say to them, you shall be holy, for I, the Lord your God, am holy. You shall not render an unjust judgment. You shall not be partial to the poor or defer to the great. With justice you shall judge your neighbor. You shall not go around as a slander among your people, and you shall not profit by the blood of your neighbor. I am the Lord. You shall not hate in your heart any one of your kin. You shall reprove your neighbor, or you will incur guilt yourself. You shall not take vengeance or bear a grudge against any of your people, but you shall love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord. So once again, this just points to that mentality. It's not that, oh, we can't do these things, or it's not, but man, Jesus just pulls it down. If you love God with everything you are, and you allow him to, once again, I think it really has to do with identity. If you allow him to create your identity, then you will go out and you will love your neighbor. Right. And so these things will just be the outflow of what it means to love God with everything that we are.
And as we always say, the good thing is he will help you do it. Little by little, piece by piece, as we meet with him early in the morning, as we give him our whole hearts, our minds. And, we have to work at that. It's a daily thing. Even the mind part, we have to surrender it to the Lord and say, any thought, take captive. I think about the whatsoever's that we've mentioned on here before too, whatever's true and lovely and pure and of good report and all of those kind of things. Anything else we need to eject out of our minds, because really, we're not ever going to sin if we don't think about it, but we have to make that effort to surrender everything that we are and all we ever hope to be to him.
Yep. And like I said, I think a beautiful thing will happen. I mean, I think God will show up and he'll move and he'll work amongst his people. And I think the world would be in a much better place because of it. And I think we'll see heaven come into earth in a powerful way if we can grasp this and just do just two things. Like I said, love God with everything that we are. Well, really, it's almost three. Love ourselves, but then also love our neighbors. Man, I think I believe. I think a lot of people, even in the church, don't believe this, that this world can be a better place. Like, man, do you really believe that do we believe in the power of love, that it really can change people on a very, very deep level?
We don't. And here we are getting close to the end, but I'm just thinking that's our biggest problem, because we want to separate ourselves from people. We want to separate ourselves and get in our holy huddles, and we want to, we don't want to be contaminated by the world. We think that we're set apart. Be holy as he's holy means that we, we retreat and stay in our own little worlds. And But no, that's not what he's called us to do.
Preach.
I know. I'm going, listen, we've been talking for 29 minutes. I can't go there. I can't. But that's so true.
That's it. Yeah. On a very, very deep level. And, you know, we could just go on and on and on and on. We really, really could. But man, just the power of love. Man, if the church could just truly believe in the power of love, and it's changing principles, not to change people, like I said, to us, because the goal is not to get people to love us. Like I said, the goal is to push them to love God and to find their identity in God. Man, if we could do that, man.
And we'll find that His love is enough for us.
Yeah,
nothing else matters. Even if people reject our love, we'll be so full of His that we'll be okay with that rejection.
Absolutely. For sure. Well, man, we hope that you enjoyed this conversation. Once again, broken record. Broken record, I feel like, on a very deep level. But I mean, to me, this is it. This is the good news. This is the gospel. This is what Jesus was all about. And man, if I just pray and hope that we can just if we could just grasp this and live this. Like I said, I believe the world would be a different place. Well, thank you so much for listening in. If you would like to reach out to us, we would love to hear from you. We do have an email address. It's growinghopelivingfaith@gmail.com.
And we have a Facebook.
Yes.
It's Growing Hope Living Faith Podcast. Yeah. We'd love to hear from you. Reach out to us anytime. And we'd love to pray for you. If you're going through anything, we would love to know about that. And
absolutely. Absolutely. Well, that was a great conversation. I enjoyed it. Not to pat ourselves on the back, I guess, but no, I really enjoyed that conversation, and it's always challenging to me. Man, may you continue to live the life that God's called you to live. Will you love Him with everything you are, and then love your neighbor as much as you love yourself? Grace and peace. God bless. And bye-bye.